Welcome to Catching Flights with Ranvir. This is a new podcast, and I'm really excited to be launching this with my very first guest today. It's Nikon Gormley with me. How are you, Nikon?
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast and congratulations for starting it. I think it's a great
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, thank you. Actually, I was inspired by you. I remember
Uh,
you were telling me when we last met that, starting a podcast is just as easy as one, two, three. So, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
kind of inspired by you to get here today.
Well, I'm happy we did it. And it is. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, since this is the first episode, I think it makes sense to kind of introduce what the podcast is kind of about and what we're going to be talking about. So, Nick on here is someone I've actually met very recently, but we get along so well and we're so like-minded on many different things. And he was a really apt guest when I wanted to create this podcast because it might be called catching flights and people will think that it's just about traveling and, which is the cheapest flight to take or something like that. But in actuality, it's just a theme for exploring who you are, finding your best self, seeing the world, connecting with anyone and everyone, right? Based on who you are as a person and not where you are. So that's definitely the overarching theme of the podcast today. So
That's a
yeah, but
cool thing.
before,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so too, and it's kind of unique, no?
it is. It is. I like it. I like how you're mixing the catching flights and travel, that theme, with personal development and growth. I think everybody will really like that.
Yeah, well, let's see.
Okay, let's see how it
So,
goes.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Nikon, why don't you tell the viewers who maybe don't know who you are a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, that's a great place to start. So, my name is Nikon Gormley. I am based in Bangkok, Thailand. And for this show, I am a transformative coach. I work with leaders, executives, people all around the world. And I really do two things. I help people learn how their mind works because I really believe if you know how your mind works, life is much easier to navigate. And number two, I help them tap into, I think, their deeper nature and their true potential, and to align with that to create cool things in the world or to be in the world. Because I believe that most people, they, because they don't know how to do that, I think they experience life as being very hard or creating a lot of effort or a lot of, like, it's all, I feel like they feel like it's all on their shoulders, not realizing that
Hmm.
there's a deeper knowing that can help guide them and create things in the world. Some people call it flow, when you're in flow and you create things and it just seems
Yeah.
like an easier experience. And I think the misconception is that you have to do all these things to get into that flow. And I think my point of view is if you really know how it works, it's a lot easier to be in that state and create from that space more of the time. Yeah.
Hmm.
And also, fun facts, I also own a Taekwondo franchise. I'm a Taekwondo teacher. I have fifth Dan black belt, if that means anything to anybody. And we have
Wow.
12 branches in Thailand. We teach 400 kids a week, and we have 15 staff, and that's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me more about the Taekwondo first. Let's kind of talk
Okay, yeah,
about that
because you did
because
Taekwondo. Yeah. Well,
yes, I have two dans.
yeah,
So for those who will understand what I'm saying, and
yeah,
funnily enough, the certificates are on either side of me.
yeah,
But yeah, like Taekwondo is one thing that we have in common, and
yeah.
at least for me, I saw the real benefit of it from a mentality point of view. Like it
Mm,
really made me more centered and more disciplined.
mm.
I don't know if you can say the same or what your experiences are from doing
Sure.
Taekwondo.
I I got into Taekwondo when I was 12, and I think before Taekwondo, I was very active, I had a lot of energy, and was, like, I think, hyper analytical. I would overthink things. I was also very spoiled as a kid, I think. And
Okay.
Taekwondo really gave me that grounding and something to, like, really hone my focus. It gave my life a lot of structure. It gave me peers. It gave me, like you said, mindsets, just like how to grow and how to push
Hmm.
myself to be better than I was yesterday. And I think the deepest thing, interestingly enough, I felt the most at peace I felt for most of my young adult life was during Taekwondo because you had to focus on what was in front of you. And
Yes.
doing that over years taught me how to do that outside of Taekwondo, just how to really focus and be very present to things. Yeah.
Okay. And are those like some of the principles you also carry on when you do your transformative coaching, or is
I
there no real overlap?
I reckon that's a good question. Nobody's asked me that before. I
Hmm.
reckon Taekwondo was a door that helped me tap into that space of just not worrying about myself or life and just being really present to what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that to me is like a direct connection to your potential, because when you're really present, there's no interference. The Wi-Fi signal from you to your deeper knowing is really clear, you know.
Hmm.
And when you're doing Taekwondo and you're someone's trying to kick you and you're moving, you're just so present and you're not worrying about, you're not self-conscious like, how do I look today? Am I smart? Am I good enough today? Am I achieving my goals today? You're not worrying about any of that stuff. You're just really present on trying to kick this thing in front of you or not get kicked. And
Yes, exactly.
yeah, and the side effects of that is again a deeper connection to your true potential. And that's why it felt good, you know.
Yeah, I think, I see it the same way as well. Like, as much as the discipline and the idea of being centered was very, the key takeaway for me
Mm,
from Taekwondo, I actually felt as though it enabled me to kind of discover who I am a little bit more as well, and
mm,
discover more aspects to my personality, my character, and my behavior that I didn't really know about. And funnily enough, like you, I was also kind of a spoiled kid.
mm,
Not in the sense that, my parents would buy me whatever I
yeah.
wanted, and,
Mm.
and they would tell me stuff, but it was more from a, acting out kind of way,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
rebellious
Acting
kind of
out,
way.
rebellious. I just, I'm pissed off. I'm a rebel without a cause. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it was one of those things that, kind of helped me just, how do I say it? Navigate away from
Yeah,
that kind of attitude,
yeah, yeah,
simply by being there, being centered, being in the moment, and kind of just shifted my personality. And,
yeah,
the kid that started Taekwondo and the kid that stopped doing
yeah,
Taekwondo when he graduated high
yeah,
school
yeah,
were two
yeah.
completely different people.
And what occurred to me as you were saying how when you're doing martial arts, the behavior of being spoiled or acting out doesn't make sense to you. And so you don't do it.
Hmm.
Like there was no decision like I'm going to stop being spoiled and rebellious and an asshole.
Yeah.
It's when you're in it didn't make sense to do that. And funny now that you talk, because I work with a lot of kids, and I can see the before after. I can see the kids who come in maybe a little bit spoiled, who like to act out, who are slowly starting to adjust to being more calm, to being less afraid as
Hmm.
well. And I think a lot of people talk about this who do martial arts is they're less aggressive and they're less likely to pick fights because you have no reason to. There's how much what's involved and how it might hurt them and how it might hurt you, and it makes less
Yes.
sense to start that, right? Whereas people who don't do martial arts, they might be more likely to be aggressive because they're like they have a fear or they're anxious and they need to act out. Yeah, that's a great insight.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's true.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a very natural thing.
Mm,
It's one of those things where your subconscious really gets tapped,
yeah.
um, and it enables you to grow as
Mm,
well from just doing what you're doing. And that idea of rote learning, right, and
mm,
consistency and showing up and just doing the same patterns within the same number of times, the same
yeah.
number of moves, right? That rote learning is not just applicable in the sport or in the field of taekwondo, but also in work or in life itself, right? Consistency is just key, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. I have a joke with myself. Even right before I retired from like I would say professional taekwondo at the age of 33, I was still learning new things about a roundhouse kick. And for those listening, a roundhouse kick is like one of the fundamentals of taekwondo, like one of the first kicks you learn in the first 2, 3 classes. I was still learning new things about that, about the fundamentals. And what I saw was there's an evergreen nature of that being of what you're talking about being curious, where even the most basic and fundamental things you can still see new things about. And I really believe that
Hmm.
in the theme of what we're talking about, taekwondo, Like when you think you get it, but then someone kicks you, you're like, oh, I guess I didn't get it. I thought I got it, but no, I guess not. There's something new to learn here.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that kind of open mindedness, that beginner's mind mentality of being a good student is so important to living a wonderful life. And I really think
Okay.
that when you think you know it, you've there's a scientific word for it, but I don't remember it. But it's something about how
Hmm.
when you think you know, a part of your brain shuts off because you know it. Like, I think I know this, so I've stopped being curious and wondering about it. And so
Like muscle memory?
not that it's not muscle memory. It was so when you travel and you love to travel and you're
Yeah.
seeing something new or a place new
Hmm.
for the first time. And a lot of people will say they're very, very present and they feel like they're in flow because there's parts of your brain that are like all open and they're just taking in everything, the senses, the sounds. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
that that state of mind leads to a wonderful life. And in Taekwondo, that was always present for me because I always wanted to be better, to learn more. And it's when you think you know, oh, I know this, that those faculties seem to shut off. Like, well, I know this. Why do I have to be aware of this?
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Like it becomes part of your normal state, right? That
right, like I
balance.
know this, and in living one in the theme, right? Like when I think people do that with people a lot. Oh, I know you, so I've stopped being curious about you. Oh, I know business. I've stopped being curious about it. Oh, and
Hmm.
I think what I'd love to give to people who's listening to this and the theme of this conversation is like, if you go back to that wondering state, things open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned an interesting terminology. Actually, I've not heard it before. The idea of wonderful, but two words.
Yeah, yeah.
Like what do you mean by that? I've not heard that term before.
So I got it from my one of my coaches and mentors, Michael Neal, and I forgot. I think the saying comes from Einstein. You could, like, there's two ways to live. You could live like nothing is a miracle, or you could live like everything is a miracle. And it's the going back to being in a wonderful state where you're just really wondering about stuff. You're like, wow, this is so cool. Like, look at my hand, like kids do that. They're like, I
Yeah.
have a hand. Like, I can think a thought
Yes.
and this thing moves and it's engineered. And if I scratch it, it can heal itself. Like, that's so cool, you know?
Yeah.
And so being in a state of wonder, actually, I just saw it fresh for the first time now. When you're in a state of wonder, your life becomes more full.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting point of view. I mean, I'm surprised that would be attributed to Einstein, but Einstein was a
Yeah.
genius in many ways,
I have to
so
go
no
back and check
surprises
it,
as well.
but that's the first thing that came to mind. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that into to the theme of your podcast, wonderful becomes a lot more present when you're traveling because things look very new to you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as well, like what internationality and what this idea of connecting globally with people does for you is expands your horizons as well, right? So you have a lot of different ways to make your life more full, right?
Mm,
There are more stimuli, there are more opportunities, there are more adventures, lessons to be learned, and I think that also kind of contributes to this concept here that you're talking
right.
about.
And what I'd love to point to is you don't have to travel to experience that, but travel is
Mm,
a great catalyst to that point of view.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
teach a lot of my workshop is to show up fresh to things, to really, really show up fresh. In the Taoism, they call it the unnaming of names. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite knowing. So the unnaming of names is, and you'll see it when I say it. So when you walk in the jungle or the forest, like that's a tree. These are all trees. Like I've already named it in my head, so I don't need to think
Hmm.
about it. And when you unname it and you look at it freely fresh, so you take a fresh look at this organic thing that's coming out of the ground, it becomes new
Yeah.
again. And we do this, I think, unconsciously in our life. Oh, and it's a way of our brain of not taking in too much information. Because if you
Hmm.
take in all the information, you kind of get overwhelmed and overloaded, right? So our brain was like, that's a tree, that's Ranvir, this is a startup. We all put in nice little boxes. And
Yes, yes.
to stop thinking about it. But to know that you, for intentionally, you can show up to things like, let me take a fresh look at business. Let me take a fresh look at myself. Like, who am I really beyond my experiences, my history, my beliefs? Like, who am I really? And
Hmm.
that that knowing, or that kind of way of looking at things, just opens up so many things.
Yeah. Interesting point of view. I'm not very familiar with Taoism, if I'm being
Yeah,
honest,
yeah.
but yeah, I've definitely heard that it's it's very spiritual and very
Hmm.
intellectual in
Yeah,
its fundamentals.
yeah. And
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna throw the ball to you. Like, when you travel, what was that like when you saw things for the first time? Like, what did that feel like?
Oh, I mean, really fascinating. I think the most fascinated I've ever been, and I mean, I would say like fully emotional, was when I saw Machu Picchu
Mm,
for the first time. Like
hmm.
coming up those stairs, and if you've ever been to Peru, you would know what I'm talking about. And walking down and up those stairs until you can see it, and the clouds open up, and it's just magnificent. And I think for me, it wasn't the fact that I got there to see this ruined city in the middle of the mountains, right? If we're gonna be very practical about it, like you can see ruins anywhere, right? Even in Thailand itself, you can go and
Mm,
see ruins in Sukhothai or Ayutthaya,
mm,
right? It's not but for me, it was the journey to get there, right? I trekked there for 5 days. I did the Salkantay trek, and along the way, I learned a lot of um, Incan, ancient Incan rituals,
mm,
that involved Mother Earth and nature
hmm,
and the concept of living a pure life, being pure minded. And the idea of climbing up this mountain called Salkantay, which is like God's mountain,
mm.
and you're climbing up there as a pilgrimage to Machu Picchu. And I think just being a part of that cultural history and going through that arduous journey myself was just, I mean, it was something else. And it was the first time I'd ever done something like that. And I was so overwhelmed, emotional,
Yeah.
once I got there to the end. And, it's just, I think, probably the most spectacular moment of my life.
You, you know what's really beautiful about what you said is, like, that's
Mhm.
it. That really is the, like, being in your potential, because you weren't like, I was worried about what I looked like and what I was gonna do, my goals, my achievements. Like, your focus was completely off of yourself and just in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just all went out the window, and I
All
was
out the
just there in the
window.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah. And
and looking to make sure I got there.
yeah.
So,
And a lot of people will say, okay, I need to go to Machu Picchu to get whatever Ranvir had. And I'm going to say, you can take that wherever you go, because it's portable. That feeling is portable. It just takes the noticing of where your attention is. And I think
mhm,
I think in the mundane of life, our attention is overly on ourselves. How am I doing?
yes.
How am I looking? Am I achieving my goals? And then all it takes is a slight shift for your attention to just really look fresh at what you're seeing, and all those things that you describe will come back, because that's a
Hmm.
natural effect of being really present to stuff.
Yeah, and let me ask you
Yeah.
this, right? So, how do people reduce the importance of superficiality in their life, according to you? Caring about how they look, what bag they're carrying, does it show status? Am I wearing a $300,000 watch? Right?
Mm-hmm.
People care a lot about that,
Mm.
but those are not the most important things in life. At least I don't think so.
Sure.
Because
That's a good
yeah. So
question.
what do you think?
What I think is, people do what makes sense to them given the thinking they have in the moment. And so if they're operating under thinking that if I get more nice stuff, I'll be more important and I'll be more safe, that's all they're going to want to do.
Hmm.
And the moment they see something different, like, I don't have to do that, they'll stop doing that. It'll stop making sense. And sometimes it'll happen through an experience, like they'll go through something really traumatic, and they'll get a fresh perspective on life, and that will completely change the course of their life. Or it might even take getting there. You see a lot of well, let me tell you a story. I have a friend
Yeah.
whose father was a CEO of an $800 million company. and he ran that company for many, many years, was very, very successful, and recently retired at like 65. He then went and got a job, like a part-time job at like Home Depot or something, or like
Okay.
IKEA or something, just because he just wanted something to do.
Okay.
And he he was, and the story goes, he was noticing the manager struggling with like some really basic inventory or staffing, and he went and he said, "Oh, if you just did this, this, and this, it should work." And it worked great. And the lady was like, "Do you want to be manager?" And he's like, "Nope." And he walked away.
Oh my God.
Right. And so that, to me, that's a good story because it illustrates someone who got to the top might not want to hang out there all the time. It's like, all right, I've done this. I'm good. My life perspective now is I just want to be useful, and that's it. And
Hmm.
I don't want to think about stuff anymore. I want to do my part-time job and go home. And so to answer your question in a different way, it would be, do they know how well they're made? Meaning, when you
Hmm.
know how well you're made and how well your mind is made and how it works, you stop doing things that you think are going to make you happy, and you start doing things because you're happy.
Mm.
So I'll say that again
Yeah.
in a different way. When you're unhappy, you want to be happy, and when you're happy, you want what you want. And most of us
Yes.
are trying to do things to become happy. If I just had the luxury things, the status, the power, the money, the spouse, the family, and then I'll be happy, and then I'll do what I really want to do. That's bullshit. You don't have to do any of that. If
Yeah.
you can, happiness is an inside out gig, and there's so many books and people who say that. But what I didn't know and I recently learned is, when you're happy, you want very different things.
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, I couldn't agree more because, for me, I'm, it's very strange to say this, but I'm at a position where I feel like I'm very satisfied,
Mm,
and every goal that I had
mm,
for myself, I've achieved.
yeah,
And, sure, I want to visit every country in the world. I want to have, $1 million
yeah,
income
yeah,
and all
yeah,
that kind of stuff. Great. But those are larger goals. Like I had very
yeah,
specific goals that would make me truly happy from within. Right. And one of those things was like visiting Machu Picchu, doing the
yeah,
climb. Another thing was like visiting Iran. Another thing was, to get a job where I can help other people. And this is why I lecture part time on the side, because I
mm,
want to pass my knowledge on to the students that I work with, and I'm really satisfied. I might not be, Elon Musk with $300 billion in the bank, but I'm happy with what I have,
yeah,
and I think once I reach that, like what I want is just a bonus, and anything that I get beyond what I have is something that makes me feel, two times more happy than it would, because it's just all a
yeah,
bonus to me at this point.
yeah. I was gonna say, I don't think you'd want Elon Musk's life.
No, too much stress, right?
I don't know, but I like looking at it. I don't think I'm really happy with my life. And what you said is really to to add on to what you said is, when you come from this contented place, the things you want are very different. And for me, what I've noticed is I need less and I want less.
Hmm.
And the way I live my life, I get to do a lot of cool things. And sure, it's like you want stuff, but you're wanting stuff for the different. You want stuff because you actually want it, not because you think, oh, if I get this and then, if I get that and then. Like, I
Hmm.
really love what you said. Is what I want is a bonus. I'm good.
Yeah, as long as you're happy with where you are, you have a good life, you have a smile on your face, you wake up
Right,
every day, it's what you
right,
can be grateful for.
right. And going back to your point is, you can want and like really nice things and have no attachment to it. That those things mean nothing about you. It's just that you like really well made watches and cars. It's like, that's cool. Like, do that because
Hmm.
you really want it, not because you think somebody else is gonna think that you're gonna look better or more important because blah 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 blah.
Yes,
You know.
absolutely.
And I really think this way, this point of view, and this way of living allows you to have a much more fulfilling life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I like to say to people, but this is very regarding how you spend your income. So maybe a little bit of a
Yeah,
sidetrack, but
sure.
it really relates to this point, right? And I always say that most people can spend their income on three things, right? After you saved and
Mm-hmm.
all and paid your bills, all of that, right? You got a spare amount of income, right? You can spend on generally travel, right? Experiences, seeing the world, meeting new people,
Mm-hmm.
learning new things, right? Another thing is material goods, bags, watches, shoes, clothes, $10,000 suits, cars. And the third thing is food,
Mm.
right? Because there are a lot of people who appreciate fine dining and, being a foodie, going to the absolute best restaurants, best cafes, and I think as long as you're doing what you're doing for yourself, that's the key. So for me, I don't really see the sense in spending thousands of dollars on food.
Mm.
I just don't. Maybe because I'm from Thailand and street food is
Yeah,
like the best thing
yeah,
ever.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like I don't understand why anyone would pay more than $2 for food. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
but for me, it's like, yeah, I want to spend that money that I have on the travel because that's what makes me happy. I don't really care
Mm-hmm.
what other people think
Mm-hmm.
about me, and I'm my best self because of it. Because I
Yeah,
block all that shit out, and I'm just focusing on what is best for me and what I know is best for me.
yeah.
So that's just something I wanted to share as well.
That's wonderful. I'd love to add to it. It's because you're being your best self or more aligned with your true nature. You're really clear about what you want and what you don't want.
Hmm.
And I really think clarity is a huge side effect of being who you really are. I'm working with a client, and I can share this story. I told her
Sure.
I told her I was going to share this story. She said to me, she's interviewing for jobs, but she in the past she only stayed at a job 1 year at a time and never really longer because she felt uncomfortable. It was time to go. And then she shared
Hmm.
that when she got those jobs in the interviews, she really tried to make herself become the right type of person for that job to get that job. And she would like
Yeah.
hype up her resume or like do things. And then she said, but when she got the job, she was just really uncomfortable because it wasn't who she really was. And during our sessions, she said, Nikon, I'm realizing that if I'm just being myself, I'll probably get the job that's right for me. And we
Absolutely.
both got quiet and we're like, damn, that's some profound wisdom. Like that is just common sense, true wisdom. And then we both kind of laughed because we'd wondered why she didn't see that before. And what occurred to her was before because she thought she wasn't good enough or she had to be something to get that job at that brand name company. And through our sessions, she realized she didn't have to do that anymore. And now I
Hmm.
know because she's more of herself, life will put her in the right place. Or
Yeah.
she'll see
That's a
things more
really,
clearly. Yeah.
it's a really cool story, and it's so simple, but at the same time, it is profound, right? Like it's not
Right.
something that just occurs as common sense,
Yeah.
even though maybe it should be,
It's
you know?
common sense, but it's hidden, right? So that's my other thing too, is when you're being in your words, your best self, or in my world, it's like you're really in touch with your potential or your true nature. Common sense is a lot more accessible
Yes.
than it ever was before simply because, and you said it, because we're not in our heads overthinking things. Like you could
Mm,
really enjoy Machu Picchu because you were really, really present and you weren't overthinking Machu Picchu.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And, just being in the moment. And I mean, obviously having no internet and no cell connection
yeah,
helps.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
get me wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe it would have been a different experience if I had Instagram to take
Selfie.
stories and all that. Yeah. So, maybe that made a difference, but you're absolutely right for sure. And, one of the things as well that this really connects to, and one of the key themes that I think you and I really
Mm-mm,
connect on as well is
mm,
the concept of a growth mindset,
mm.
right? And so I just wanted to ask you, like, what would you say very simply is a growth mindset to you?
Cool. So what occurs to me as you were sharing, this might be a little bit left field than what people normally talk about growth mindset is.
Yep.
Growth is what naturally happens when you stop messing with the system. So if we look at nature, plants, everything, growth is a very inherent part of nature. Anything living naturally grows. Plants, animals, babies grow without a growth mindset because there's something inside of them in their design that says babies naturally grow and to become young people and adults.
Right.
And then when we align with that, you naturally grow, you naturally want more things, you naturally develop, and you want to see deeper. And I think when you forget, when you kind of get further away from that alignment, or you become disaligned and you get trapped in maybe insecurities or doubts or fears, thinking you have to prove something, I need this to be happy, you lose touch with that part of you that naturally wants you to grow and be and bloom and help people. So what I really think a whole new way of thinking about a growth mindset is how aligned you are to your best self, how aligned you are to your true nature, your deeper nature. And from that
Mm.
place, you grow. And I want to bust a myth is people think
Okay.
that if I just install this mindset, I should get the same results. And that's so untrue. You could watch The Last Dance on Netflix and like write down all of Michael Jordan's mindsets. You're not going to perform like Michael Jordan, and you're not going to have his life either, even though you have his mindsets, because a mindset is an output. It's not an input. A mindset is a
Hmm.
result of living life. And then you get a perspective. And people are like,
Yeah.
oh, if I just get that perspective, I should get that same result. But it's not true. So I'll give you
Yeah.
another good example. I'm reading a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is a highly recommended business book. I'm halfway
Okay.
through. So do you know what? Okay, so Good to Great is a book by Jim Collins, and he went and interviewed all these companies who had had amazing growth, good to great growth, like meaning like mediocrity to like really great growth. And he measured it by like their stock prices and the growth of the company. So I'm like, okay, this sounds like a good business book to read. And the premise of the book is he interviews all these leaders from these companies to try and get their mindsets, to try and figure out what exactly do they do to grow it. And he boils it down to like 4 things or something. So I'm reading this
Hmm.
book halfway through and I realized, I was like, oh, but the guys that he interviewed, none of them had this book. They were just doing what made sense to them in the moment.
Okay.
So here I am trying to read this book to get their strategies to growing, but that's not what those guys did. What those guys did
Right.
was simply tap into their creativity, their innovation, and did what made sense to them moment to moment. So then I started reading the book for a different reason. I started reading the book for like amusement. Like, okay, this could be interesting, rather than like, okay, the secret is somewhere on this page, what are the strategies that guy did? I realized I was trying to install their mindsets to myself, not realizing that's not what any of those leaders did.
Yes.
They were just
For
simply
sure.
being in life and responding to opportunities and challenges that occurred. And then after that insight, I did notice that my business did do better, because I stopped looking everywhere else for answers and started to be still enough and let answers come to me.
Hmm. And from the purpose of an input versus an output,
Yeah.
right? I think like one thing I wanted to add as well is, the input is very much underrated,
Yeah.
right? You can, let's just go with the Last Dance
Mm,
example, right?
mm,
If Michael Jordan tells you like, okay, A, B, C, D, E, this is what I believed.
mm.
If you take that and you apply it to, let's say, playing basketball, but you're, an amateur at college, right?
Yeah.
Uh, you could probably be a little bit better
Mm.
because, of course, you're changing your mind to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
the
Mm,
same as one of the greatest of all time,
mm,
if not the greatest of all time. And what people don't realize is the input that he put in. The guy was living and breathing basketball. Everything was about that. Hours in the gym,
mhm,
that extra 1% in the gym that Kobe had too, right? And I think
mm,
one of the key stories that Kobe shared that is very important to me is just staying that extra 30 minutes for practice
mm.
every single day. That compounds over time, right?
Yeah.
People think like, oh, 30 minutes, like, what does it matter? Maybe I'll just shoot like, 10 free throws or whatever.
Mm,
But you don't realize that you're shooting 10 more free throws a day than everybody else. And
Yeah.
over a period of time, that compounds. And that's actually one of the biggest lessons that
Mm.
I've taken for myself in my life too,
Mm.
right? Is consistency and input.
Right. And to add on to that is when you watch those interviews with Kobe and Michael Jordan, you realize at some point they stopped thinking about other people. Like it wasn't 30 more minutes better than more than other people. It's 30 more minutes because they genuinely like doing it. And it
Yes.
just so happens that like it resulted in extra 30 minutes like over a long period of time. And because they just really like basketball.
Yeah.
Right. And then what occurs to me is also is you might not really want Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant's life because there was like a lot of dark sides to them, to their personalities too, right?
Of
And
course.
so it's going to letting yourself be inspired and not taking it on as a prescription, thinking if you take the same medication Michael Jordan did, you're going to get the same results, or Kobe. You know, for
Hmm.
example, 30 minutes a day in the wrong direction is way off,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Definitely.
So what I'd love
Got to
for
do what's best for you.
right, yeah. So what I love for people listening to growth mindset is there's something inside of you that's incredibly resourceful, that letting yourself be inspired and really learning how to navigate and trust yourself, right? Like trust yourself, and that'll take you
Hmm.
places you never even dreamed of.
Yeah. And, I think having a growth mindset as well, I don't know if you'll agree with me on
Yeah.
this, but having a growth mindset is actually what separates good leaders from great leaders, right? Because having that growth mindset allows them to also look within, which is something I think big business leaders fail to do from time to time.
Hmm.
So I think this is a very key distinguishing factor.
Right. What I would add to that is I reckon everybody has a growth mindset. They just don't know it.
Okay.
Everybody has that mindset, but very few people know how to really tap into it. Very few people know how it works, or knowing that
Hmm.
within you there's an unlimited amount of creativity and innovation. But if you think it's all on you, I'm going to call it toxic growth mindset. How about that? Okay. Toxic growth
Okay.
mindset. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to learn all the mindsets. I'm going to read all the books. I'm going to, and like go for it.
Yeah.
Versus someone who's very content and very relaxed and knows how their mind works and knows how well they're made. They'll create they'll create 10 times the results with half the effort
Hmm.
because they're aligned with how this beautiful, incredible divine engineering works.
Yeah.
It's to come
Yeah.
from, I reckon. And so um, in that book, Good to Great, the leaders that they interviewed, the guys who were doing great were the guys who were just really clear about what they wanted. And this was in a time before they even had a word for growth mindset. They were just obsessed with being better, obsessed with how could we produce better, how could we deliver better. It was only
Yeah.
much, much later that said, oh, that thing, that's a growth mindset. And he was like, okay, like whatever, like that,
Yeah.
whatever,
Like a buzzword,
I
right?
was doing it
Yeah.
anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you guys heard it here first, right? Toxic
Yeah.
growth
Yeah.
mindset by Nikon
Right.
Gormley.
So I
Maybe we
reckon,
can normalize
yeah,
that.
I reckon what you're pointing to is an awareness of, again, using your words, an awareness of your best self, an awareness of your true potential. And when you tap into
Hmm.
that, it's like plugging into the mains, and growth just like,
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you have let's say like a favorite quote or like a favorite anecdote from somebody that you've heard of that you really hold true
yeah.
to yourself?
One of my favorite quotes is by Sidney Banks, and he was a cool guy. Sidney Banks was an enlightened Scottish mystic. He was a
Okay.
welder in Canada with a third grade education who had an enlightenment experience. And from that experience, he started sharing principles of how our minds work and how divine engineering works, like how your minds, how we live in the feeling of our thinking, not our circumstances, and how everything is thought. And what's really cool about his story is all these psychiatrists and doctors and psychologists would go to listen to him, this guy with a third grade education. And
Okay.
one of my favorite quotes by him is, if people only learn to be less afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world.
Wow.
Meaning, if you think about it, if we're just less afraid of life, we stop reacting to life and we start responding to life. And I think so much of us are living in fear. How do I look? Am I
Hmm.
good enough? Am I achieving my goals? Um, am I on track? And when you stop doing all that, you stop being afraid of life. Like, everything is a bonus. You start trying things. You start, I want to travel. I want to do this because I want to do it, not because I think it's going to make me happier or that, but really the one thing. If people learn to be less afraid of their experience, that alone would change everything.
Hmm. Do you think it's also a point of social norms, like a fear of failure or something would make you maybe look less good than people of the same, the same school, the same university that you went to? And that fear of failure kind of forces this comparison that kind of holds you back
Oh
from
yeah.
taking risks.
Yeah. And that's normal, but it's not natural. It's not how
Hmm.
your mind's not designed to live in fear. But if you grow up, like I would call that conditioning. If you grow up in a community where everybody's telling you to compare yourself, I think maybe in East and Asian cultures and South Asian cultures, like what's your grade? Are you doing better? Keeping up with the Joneses? Do you have a better car than that person? If that's all you knew growing up, that makes complete sense to you. Why would you not do that? Until
Yeah.
they listen to a podcast with Ranvir and they're like, wait, hold up. Are you saying I don't have to do that? Like real wait. I wish somebody would have told me, earlier. I'll give you a good example. When Westerners come to the East and they wear their shoes in the house, it's really
Hmm.
weird for people here. People are like, bro, like, we don't do that here. But,
Yep.
and it doesn't mean anything was wrong with them. Nobody told them that you shouldn't do that because it brings bacteria or dirt in the house and you want your house clean and free of that stuff. But
Hmm.
it doesn't, that was the conditioning they grew up in. It's not their fault. I remember as a kid watching Western movies, and I would watch the kids wear their shoes on their beds, and I would be like, I would feel a little uncomfortable. Like, why are you wearing your shoes in your bed? Like that's just bad. Like your bed should be very
Yeah.
clean. Like I don't understand,
Yeah.
And
Yes.
when I went to live in
Exactly.
America, I was like, oh, you all don't take off your shoes. Like, okay, like I guess. So that's the
Yeah.
same thing with being conditioned with fear to make your life better. And going back
Hmm.
to leadership, if you were brought up as a leader to use fear to push your team to do better, and that's all you knew, that's all you're gonna do.
Yes, for sure. And
Yeah,
I think it's not a good thing, but unfortunately,
yeah,
it's very prevalent,
right.
in many organizations around the world.
And that's one of my missions, and I think that's what I see for you too. Is being a light for people. Like, you don't have to do it that way anymore. Like, life can be very,
Hmm.
very different. Like
Yeah,
it really can. You don't need to push and shove your team and or treat your team in that way to make them do better. You don't have to do that anymore.
yeah.
And
You just do what's right for you. Do what's right for yourself. We're all human beings, right? We're all working to make a living. We all want to be happy doing what we're doing.
yeah,
Why don't we just all help each other grow and grow as a team, grow as a unit,
right,
right? Not one person on the top and then everybody else is just below, and they feel as though they're below.
right,
You know.
right. And I know, like in my team, I treat everybody with a very high level of regard and respect. And
Hmm.
I can appreciate that they see me as like the boss, the leader, but to me, I have equal amounts of respect for them. And you know what occurred to me? What occurred to me as you were saying this, it was, I wonder I wonder how different organizations would be if everybody was just less afraid.
Mm.
How much energy goes into managing fear and anxiety compared to innovation, creativity, well-being? I don't know. Between you and me, I think people do better when they're okay.
Well, one
Right?
would assume so.
Like it just makes sense, right? It just makes sense.
Yes.
It just makes
Yeah, man.
sense. Yeah, I would love to do more workshops with companies and just show them how they can do that and right? Because, yeah, like the quote says, people are less afraid of life. They have a more,
Mm,
like, they'll have a more wonder-filled life.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
Mm.
kind of round up all of
Mm.
what we've been talking
Yeah.
about and all the key messages and all the things that we've been saying, how prevalent do you think like cultural differences are, and the difference of the West and the East, or even the North and the South? Like, how prevalent do you think those things are to the messagings and the lessons that we have talked about? Do you think they should resonate equally with someone living in the western part of the world and the eastern part of the world, or do you think some things are just not applicable at all in the West or in the East? What would you say?
What occurs to me as you were saying that is we live in the feeling of our thinking, not our circumstances.
Mhm.
So two people, like you said, two people could watch the same movie, one from the East, one from the West, and have very, very different experiences. I think what
Yes.
you want to point to is truth. What is true, regardless of race, gender, religion, or culture? What is just true? And for example, gravity is true. No matter where you come from or what culture, gravity is, you drop something, it's going to fall. And if it doesn't fall, everybody's going to be very, very surprised. And I think what's
Yeah.
true into your question, and if it occurs to me to share it, is when we really see that, like, we're living in our thinking, we become less afraid of our thinking. Like, it's the difference I was thinking about today. What I want to share in a talk next week is the difference between watching a scary movie and knowing how movies work and not knowing how movies work is a
Hmm.
world of difference. Can you imagine when you watch like The Conjuring or something and you didn't know how movies worked and you're like, and you thought it was like a documentary, like, holy
Yeah.
shit, I need to
Yeah.
forever be afraid of ghosts and the dark, like, damn.
Yeah. And movies and the TV and
And the
everything.
TV, things gonna like crawl out of the TV and shit. But because we know how movies work, we don't react that way. We're like, okay, that was a very
Yes.
entertaining movie. I got scared. Great. I was afraid of the dark for a day. That's the difference. When you learn how your mind works and your life work, you react and you respond differently to life. You spend less time anxious. And so no matter what culture and conditioning you have, um, you recognize that energy. There's a beautiful, maybe you can help me with this. The Indian greeting Namaste
Hmm.
and where it comes from. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand is it means I recognize the God or universe in you and you recognize that same thing in me. Is that
Yes.
right?
It's very spiritual.
Right. To me, that's truth. And when
Uh,
people can see that, when they can really see the truth in that line,
mhm.
culture, religion, gender, it stops being such a big deal because you're recognizing something beyond that in people. You're
Yeah.
recognizing that
It's a
connection.
human to human connection.
Right. I can share an experience. I'll never forget it. It makes me it shook me when it first happened. I was teaching Taekwondo and this young lady must have been at least 3 years old. Bless her heart. She was about as high as my knee. And she
Okay.
was having a rough day. This little girl was having a rough day at school. She was new to school. She's new to this planet, you know. And I got down on one knee and I looked her in the eye and I said, "Hey, like, you're okay. You're
Hmm.
you're safe. Like, you're okay." And she looked at me and she got it. But something happened in that moment where it was no longer that little girl looking at me. It was something way deeper and way more true looking back at me. And I was like, oh, like, whoa. And it was almost like I was consoling the soul who's like new to this planet. Like, where the fuck am I?
How
What
did you
is it?
sense that?
I couldn't tell you. It wasn't a technique or a tool. It was like a freak. I don't want to say accident, but it was a freak experience where I connected to this little girl at a way deeper level where I saw a soul who was new to the planet who was very, very concerned at why she was little and why she couldn't go home then, or like she was just like, what is this? Like, where am I and who are you? And but she recognized me because I was talking to like that part of her that like you're okay. You're
Yeah.
safe. And she calmed down. And that experience really changed my life because like, oh, like, whoa, like that whole namaste thing, super true after that one. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Very, very profound indeed. This is why I love having these kind of
Yeah.
conversations with you. I mean, honestly, I know very few people that see life and the world the way you do, man.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I
It's
appreciate that.
it's
And
always very profound.
and and credit to you for hearing it, because not everybody has the ears to hear it, and you do.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I always learn new things from discussing with different people, and
Mm,
I like to do these kinds of chats and meet new people and try and connect as much as I can with different kinds of people, no matter who they may be or where they may
mm,
be from, because I always get something from it.
mm,
And I think the reason why, I'm starting this podcast and I'm here to kind of do it with yourself and other people like yourself is to bring these kinds of conversations
mm,
to light, bring them forward, share them with the world, because hopefully it can also, um, have an impact on someone else, and maybe they can take some learnings and lessons from the things that we've chatted about.
yeah. That was why I started my podcast. I was just having way too many good conversations to keep them to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, I want to talk a bit about that as well. So I know
Yeah.
you have your own podcast. Why don't
Yeah.
you kind of plug that a little bit?
Okay, okay. So the podcast is called Inside Cafe, and similar to this, it's recorded on Zoom and put on YouTube. And it was just simply, I was just having these great conversations, and I like, oh, I wish more people could listen in on them. So I put it on YouTube. It's Nikon Gormley, that's the channel, and then it's Inside Cafe English, and there's a Thai version, but I focus more on the English one. And similar
Yeah.
to you, I just have great conversations with really interesting people about life, business, relationships, growth, and there's that. And other things if I was to think what to plug, uh, oh yeah, there's First Free Tuesdays. I host once a month. If you want to get coached by me or an experience of having this type of conversation with me, it's on my website, nikongormley.com, Nikongormley. And if you scroll down, there should be a link to register or sign up for First Free Tuesdays. And it's an hour once a month, and the first Tuesday of the month, and you can ask anything you want, like an AMA style. And we've had
Hmm.
some pretty cool conversations on there. And I record them and put them on YouTube so people can go back and listen to them. Because sometimes, when you're in these conversations, you go back and you listen to it and you hear something new. So that's why that's there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I've not attended your Free Tuesdays
Yeah,
chat
yeah.
like this, but I definitely have to, because I mean it sounds like you get a bunch of like-minded people. So instead of just a two
Yeah.
person conversation, we're having like a
Yeah.
larger roundtable.
And then what I
Could
like
be
about it
beneficial.
is because I've attended these things from other coaches and teachers. And what I love about it is listening to the coach or facilitator coach other people. Because I learned so much from that. I learned how to help people better. I learned how to be present with people. And sometimes that other person's problem was my problem.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have
Okay.
to ask it. I was like, I get insight from listening to other people get helped as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all really cool. So, I'm going to attend one of your sessions, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
maybe I can come back to my audience
I
and review it, and
I
we
think,
can
yeah, I think you should do it. You should have a first free something for operations,
first.
Ask
uh,
Ranvir anything about how to travel, how to anything.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe at some point,
Yeah,
down the
yeah.
line, once I've established and built myself as much as you have, maybe I will
Just
I
start.
will
Just go
engage
for it.
myself.
Just try shit.
Exactly, exactly. Just have that mentality. That's one key lesson. Just go for it.
Just go for it. Try it.
So yeah. But before we wrap up, I want to give you the opportunity to ask me anything, if you wanted to ask me anything, that you had a
Sure.
question or something.
From this conversation, what's been some of your biggest what looks new to you? What's been some of your biggest insights from today?
Yeah, I definitely think, the concept of living a wonderful life,
Mm,
right? Because that, as I said, is new to me. I've not heard that term before. Those two separations of wonder and full. And I think that's just one of the big, key takeaways for me. And also the idea of input versus output,
Mm,
right? Output is something that we all focus on, like, okay, we want to be like this person, but we don't actually put in the time, the effort, the consistency. We don't see what goes on in the background. Um, and we kind of, you know, really view it from a superficial light, right? And on the
mm,
topic of superficial, I think it's super cool that, we also share a very similar view on the concept of
mm,
superficiality and kind of distancing away from
mm.
that, right? And just living your life for you, being
Yeah,
your best self, having that growth mindset, exploring what you want to explore. If that's food, great. If you want to buy a bunch of bags, great. You want to travel the
great,
world, great.
great.
But
Yeah,
be you,
yeah.
right?
Be
Just
you,
be you and be you for you. That's it.
and the world will be a better place for it. I want to add something
Absolutely.
to what you said. What occurred to me is some people think, well, if everybody was just themselves, people would do terrible things. But there's something about really being yourself when you're not afraid and you're genuinely come from who you really are, your best self.
Yeah.
Common sense is really high. And common sense, usually you don't want to hurt anybody. It makes
Hmm.
less sense. Similar to what we were talking about martial arts. When you become a really great martial artist, it just makes less sense to harm people. That was for me. I was like, why would I want to hurt this person? Because I know how much it's going to hurt and hurt me.
Yeah.
It just makes less
Yes.
sense. And I just saw that. I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, like when you're really being who you are, the common sense is just the best thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, just to wrap up this conversation, I
Yeah.
want to say big thanks to you,
My
Nikon, for
pleasure.
coming on.
Yeah.
It's my first episode. It's unbelievable to have you on, man. I
Great.
really appreciate you doing this.
My
Um,
pleasure. I
yeah, and
think,
to all
yeah.
the viewers as well,
Yeah.
nikongormley.com, right?
Yep.
Nikon's
Yep.
YouTube channel.
Yep.
Um, and you'll get to learn more about what he does, what
Hmm.
he is all about, and really one of the nicest guys I've met.
Oh,
And really, really insightful conversations to have
thank you.
with him. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
check
you
him
very
out.
much. And my last plug is um, I think this is a great idea, and I think you're going to meet a lot of great people and keep lighting up the world. And your voice is so important, and your point of view is also so important. It's going to help. You're going to help so many people. So keep going. Good luck. God bless. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you, Nikon. Have a good one.
All right. Bye bye.